Back everyone, and today I'm going to be reviewing Eden of Witches Volume 2. I finished reading like the first 6 volumes that are out in English right now, and Volume 7 doesn't come out until May, so I figured that I would just take the time for each of the volumes, aside from one because I've already reviewed one, to just review it and talk about the series some more because I really enjoyed reading it, and I think there's a lot of aesthetics and like plot points that I think people will resonate with, or that they'll see like that they like from other manga or anime and movies and whatnot that they would latch onto, and I think would make the series really popular because I feel like a lot of people aren't really talking about it as much as they should be because it is, in my opinion, that good. So I'm going to talk about it. This video will have spoilers in it because that's just how I roll. So if you don't care about spoilers, you can stay. If you do, you should probably leave. But yeah, I'm going to talk about it some more. And for the people that are leaving because of the spoilers, just know that I think this is really good and you should pick it up, especially if you like, environmentalist type stuff or like stuff like that. But without further ado, let's get into the rest of the video. Okay, so one of the best things about this volume in particular is that we get a lot of world building and like a lot of setup for things here, because volume 1 was like, you know how like the first volume of a manga, or like the first chapters, are usually just like kind of establishing why our main character is going on the journey they're going on, why they've left home, why they're enrolled in this school or whatnot. So like the first volume for Eden of Witches is very much the same. It's like, why did Pili leave home? Like, and we know it's because Tora was killed by Zakum and the soldiers and whatnot, and Oak is taking her to Eden to fulfill Tora's last wish. So this volume opens up actually from Zakum's POV, where he's asking the royals in the capital to intensify the witch hunts, which is really interesting. Because they're already pretty intense. Like, it's like the first volume already has someone being like executed for being a witch. So he's like, hey, we need to do it more. And by the way, I have notes because I think that was just a better option to do. But yeah, it opens up with that basically, and so then it flips after the royals approve that. It then flips to the wilderness again, like out in the wastes, basically. And there's someone talking to like this old man and asking like, oh, if you heard any like news or anything, like I'll trade you some stuff for some news. The old man at this point has already heard that, hey, they're intensifying the witch hunts, which this stranger is like, oh, that's not great. And then we kind of like find out that this stranger actually is a witch herself, because she comes across Pili and Oak and is like, oh, like I wasn't expecting to run into one of us out here, because I guess witches can sense each other, which is another really cool thing. Like, she sensed that Pili was there, and then she saw Oak and she was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So this witch is named hold on, Laminella. Yeah, it's an interesting name, but yeah, so that's her name, and basically she was originally a witch who lived in a settlement village that was underground, and they took care of the plants underground, whatnot. It was a very small life, very closed off from the rest of the world. But then she like went up into, like, I guess the cave to get outside, basically, and just kind of like saw the outside world at night, and she was captivated by it. And then she decided, you know what, actually, I don't want to live underground with the plants anymore. I want to like travel and like do whatever, even if it's dangerous. So she's learned all these survival skills, like how to live off the land. Like, she is eating these disgusting like rock worm maggot things. I don't know. They're gross. They're disgusting. Pili's also disgusted by them. But the thing is that, like, Pili doesn't know how to survive out here. Like, I mean, she's been the other thing is that she's been following Oak, but Oak at this point in the story is very disinterested in her, and it's just kind of like, yeah, I'm just like, I'm taking care of you because it's what Tora would have wanted, and we just have to complete this mission or whatever. So Pili takes time with Laminella to like learn how to survive out in the wilderness and like build up her survival skills. She builds up some endurance. She learns how to use a knife, and eventually she does bite the bullet and decides to like learn how to prepare the rock maggot worm things for food. And by the end of their time together, she's changed. She's a lot stronger than she was beforehand. And this all kind of also started because like this witch herself, which is another point. This witch, when Pili told her about Eden, she was like, "Oh, that's like a fairy tale. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not real." And that upsets Pili because like that's her master's last wish, her like mother figure's last wish for her to get there. But it kind of puts into perspective that the witches themselves, whereas Eden is like supposed to be a big like thing, and like it's like, oh, like that's where all the best witches go, that's like the enclave to go to. There are witches out there that are just like, that's not even real, or who have never heard of it at all, which is another interesting point of world building. It's like, why would there be witches who haven't heard of that at all? Which I have my own speculations based on this volume and some of the later ones, but that was also really interesting to see as well. But obviously, their time together comes to an end. Lemonella gives Pili a knife and also like some directions and whatnot. But Oak and Pili, continue in the direction of the plants that have been calling out to Pili for a while now, and you know they just keep going, keep like bonding towards each other, and they have this really touching moment that I enjoyed where Oak talks about the fact that Tora's dream was to get to uh, Eden, but Tora also just really loved Pili that much and wasn't going to leave her behind, and that she effectively lived her entire life, or like the majority of her life, taking like the back part of her life anyway, taking care of Pili instead of going to Eden. Um, and because Oak was a seed, but like Tora would talk to the seed daily, and so he knows what she was saying. He'd heard about Pili beforehand. And so Pili has a moment where she's like, oh, you miss her too, don't you? Like, don't worry, we're gonna fix this, we're gonna figure it out. And they have this really touching moment where they do fall asleep one of those nights, and like it's like Pili's curled up and like Oak is like curled up like big dog like around her, and it was really nice. And I was like, oh, like they're like getting along, they're bonding, that's really nice. Which like it also is the first time where we see Oak like not be super stoic, not super annoyed with Pili, because at this point he's like, I don't even want to bother with you. Like, I'm just doing this because it's what Tora wanted. But yeah, it was a really touching moment that they had together, and I really like that kind of like development of their bond. Like, it's abrasive, but at the end of the day, they both do care for the same person. Like, really and truly, they do care for Tora, and that's kind of like holding them together at this point. But they do continue in that like direction of the plants that are calling to them, and that eventually gets them to a hidden witch village, which is really cool. Which this is also where we get some more world building, because so these witches that are hiding in this kind of like inner cave in this mountain that has plants in it are actually from a village on the outside of the mountain, farther away. But the thing is that, so here's the thing. In the first volume, it is well established that all witches are women, and so obviously like that begs the question. Okay, then how are there more witches? Do like they reproduce by budding? I don't know. But it turns out there are actually humans who cast off human society, and they're known as heretics, and they live amongst the witches. They have like families. They help like build the community or whatnot. They like tend the fields or whatnot. They live amongst the witches and the plants, and they like have their own communities, which is really interesting. But these communities get found by the government, by regular humanity, and then they get attacked by soldiers. And for these particular group of witches, like that happens to them. The heretics, who are the father, well, one of them is the father of one of the only child in the camp, whose name is Ahina, and you know, systematically killed, because while the witches have some level of value, and it's like if you can capture one, that's better than killing one, the heretics are just guys and women who have no purpose outside of the fact that they're turning their back on human society and culture, so they gotta go. So that happens, and basically the soldiers pursue them, and their numbers dwindle and dwindle. And then by the time they reach that cave where they're hiding, where Pili and Oak find them, there's only about like maybe 6 of them left at that point, including the child Hina. And this is where we get some really good world building, I think, because the first thing is that, so this is where we get the hint that like Eden might be a real place, because the oldest of the witches is like, oh, I haven't heard that name in a while. Like, so like she's actually heard of this place. Like, she understands what Eden is. She like has it. She has context for it. Whereas like maybe the younger witches don't. Some of the witches like just have no idea about this sort of thing. So it kind of renews Pili's sense of like, oh, I'm like doing this for something. Like, this is a real place. I'm traveling. I'm getting somewhere. Whereas before she was like, I don't even know if I'm like actually gonna find this place, because like it seems like nobody lives in it. It might not even be real. And so what's more is that Pili also learns that there is a connection to the plants that she has that other witches don't have, a special power basically, that again not all of them have. Like Hina, actually, the child in the village, is the only one there who has this ability, which is basically when Hina gets upset, the plants lash out, like they grow and they go crazy and whatnot. And then we saw something similar in Volume 1, where when Pili was escaping the human village, she, I believe she was crying or something, and the plants basically like rose up and swatted around and protected her, and oh, I can't remember the boy's name, but basically protected them and allowed them to get away. And Pili was like, wait, I thought that was Oak that did that. No, Oak was like, no, that was you did that. So she's basically confronted with the fact that she has this unknown ability that she doesn't know how to use, and that she's like actually special in some sort of way. So like that's a lot for her to take in. She's like, oh, I have no idea like how to process this. I don't even know how to use this ability. But then her and Hina have a really like heartfelt conversation as well, because Hina has more context for this than Pili does, which is ironic because Pili's probably like, I think I would say maybe 15 or 16, and Hina's maybe like 8. But she's a better grasp on her powers, or at least the fact that she has them, than Pili does, because Pili just learned that this was a thing. So they have a really nice conversation where it's like, yeah, you know, I'm happy I met you, and like I'm happy you're here, and like they're talking and whatnot. But this is also where we get like this weird kind of thing, because like, so this is a big enough space where everyone, people can go off on their own. Like they've been hiding here for a while. But Oak goes off by himself, and he has like this internal like monologue where he's talking about how like, you know, Pili's growing, she's getting stronger, but then he also mentions that like Hina, who's the kid, also has abilities, and that should anything happen to Pili, she would make a good replacement. And then he's like what did he say? Something akin to like all hail the plants, or like what was it, for the emerge? I forget, but like he's saying something, and this is my first inkling that like maybe the plants aren't entirely trustworthy either, because like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by that? And then I'm also just thinking, because I mean, we look at this cover, right? So like obviously this didn't happen to her in the manga, but we see like plants growing out of her and like out of her head, and like her fingers are like roots and like bark. And I have to wonder, just because Oak is a wolf with plants growing out of him and with like, you know, that sort of thing going on. So I'm like, what would happen with a human with where that happens? You know what I mean? Like, is there some sort of like, are they like, what are the plants doing? And this is my first inkling of that. And like, there's more like crumbs of this sprinkled through a little bit in some of the later volumes, but that was my first inkling of like, maybe the plants aren't 100% trustworthy. Which, I mean, then who can you trust in this world, right? But basically, the volume kind of comes to a close where, sorry, my bad. Hina kind of like didn't know about her father's fate because her mother's been keeping that secret. Her mother's like, yeah, you know, like they separated from us, but like, you know, he's still out there. But you know, while they're asking Pili to leave because they're afraid that she's gonna attract more people, Hina's there, and they let slip that, yeah, your dad's like dead. And Hina, naturally being an 8-year-old, freaks out about this, and the plants go crazy. She's going crazy. The plants are actually like wrapping around her and like strangling her and like hurting her, because her powers are just going out of control completely. And this basically allows someone very far away, who is introduced in more detail in the following volume, to sense where this witch enclave is, and then, you know, deploy soldiers over there. Which, you know, when I first was reading this, I was like, wait a minute, we already have context for the fact that witches can sense each other, and now you have someone who can sense the witches in the enclave, but is also like, we're gonna send soldiers over there. So like, what's going on there? But yeah, like I said, lots of interesting crumbs in this volume, especially like for the world building, like for the relationship between humans and witches, the relationship between the witches and the plants, the relationship between like whatever Oak is doing. Like, obviously going to Eden is tied to having special abilities, having powers over like plants, but what does that mean? Like, what's the end goal? Especially since like it's very clear like Oak is like, okay, well, if things don't work out with Pili, we can just replace her with Hina. So interesting stuff going on there. I really enjoyed it. It's almost like there's a layer of mystery here that I really enjoyed that wasn't present in the first volume, just because the first volume was like, we got to get to Eden, that's where all the witches go. But now it's like, what is Eden is like the big question here. So yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed the world building that came out of this one. It was a really solid second volume, I think, to like get you like more invested in the setting, more invested in the characters, and just kind of like bring you in and like make you go, oh yeah, like what is going on? Like, I want to figure this out alongside these characters and like go on this journey. But yeah, that's kind of like my review of that. I don't know. I love world building. I'm a sucker for world building, so like anything that's gonna like pull me in, I'm all for it. Okay, so that's gonna be it for today. I'm gonna be doing, like I said, the rest of the series just because I think it's really good, and again, it's like what I've been reading recently, so I think it's just more appropriate that I talk about it a little bit. I am going to space them out because I'm reading some other stuff and I'm doing some other stuff that I want to talk about, especially because I want to, again, get more frequent, or at least try and do like maybe every 2 weeks or like every week with a video if I can. But yeah, I just wanted to take the chance to like talk more about the volume and spread the word about the series because again, it's very good. And if you haven't checked it out, if you stayed till the end, and you didn't care about spoilers and like that like brief summary, kind of like got you interested, check it out. It's good. It's very good. Like yeah, 10 out of 10. But yeah, I've loved it so far, and I can't wait to continue reviewing it and eventually read Volume 7 in May. So, thanks, guys, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. So, see ya. Have a good day.